Picture this. You're sitting in a conference room, and your boss is standing at the front with that warm, genuine smile that made you like them in the first place. They're talking about the company's rough quarter, how everyone needs to pull together, and then they drop it. I know I'm asking a lot, but we're not just coworkers here. We're a family, and families show up for each other when times get tough. Everyone nods. A few people smile. You feel a little swell of emotion because, yeah, you do care about these people. You've been through a lot together. And families do sacrifice for each other, right? So when your boss asks if you can cover the weekend shift without overtime pay, or take on another person's workload, or maybe postpone that vacation you've been planning for months, you say yes, because that's what family does. Here's what nobody tells you about that warm, fuzzy, we're a family culture at work. It's not about creating a supportive environment where people thrive. It's about manipulating your emotions to extract more labor for less money. And the really insidious part? The people using this language usually believe they mean well. They think they're building something special while they're actually building a mechanism to exploit you. My name is John, and I spend way too much time thinking about workplace psychology, corporate manipulation tactics, and why good people keep getting taken advantage of by companies that claim to care about them. If you've ever felt guilty about setting boundaries at work, or wondered why your work family disappears the moment you're no longer useful, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you see through the corporate emotional manipulation playbook. Now, before we dive into the mechanics of how this scam works, let me be crystal clear about something. I'm not saying your coworkers don't care about you. I'm not saying workplace friendships aren't real. I'm not even saying your boss is necessarily a bad person. What I am saying is that framing your workplace as a family is a deliberate tactic, conscious or not, to make you act against your own economic interests. And once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the most obvious problem, which somehow everyone seems to miss. Families and businesses operate on completely opposite principles, and pretending otherwise creates a relationship that only benefits one party. You. In a real family, when someone is struggling, everyone pitches in to help them. When your brother loses his job, you don't fire him from being your brother. When your mom gets sick, you don't calculate whether her medical costs exceed her productive value to the family unit. When your kid makes a mistake, you don't put them on a performance improvement plan with a 30-day timeline to shape up or ship out. Families are unconditional, and no families operate on loyalty, love, and mutual sacrifice, regardless of whether it makes economic sense. Businesses, on the other hand, are transactional. You provide labor, they provide compensation. The moment the transaction stops being favorable to the business, the relationship ends. And that's not evil, by the way. That's just what businesses are. They exist to generate profit, not to provide emotional support and unconditional love. The problem starts when companies use family language to convince you to act like you're in a family while they continue to act like a business. They want you to sacrifice like family. They want you to be loyal like family. They want you to prioritize the group's needs over your own interests like family. But the moment you need them to act like family, the moment you need unconditional support, personal sacrifices from them, or loyalty that costs them money, suddenly it's just business. Here's what this looks like in practice, and I guarantee you've either experienced this or watched it happen to someone you know. Your company talks endlessly about being a family, they have team-building events, they celebrate birthdays, they know about your personal life. Your boss remembers your kids' names, there's genuine warmth and camaraderie. Then the company gets acquired, or the quarter numbers are bad, or a new executive decides to restructure. And the people who sacrificed their evenings, their weekends, their vacation days, their personal boundaries because they were family, they get laid off in a conference room by someone from HR they've never met, with a severance package calculated to the minimum legal requirement. The family language evaporates the moment it costs the company money. Let me show you the actual economics of what the family pitch costs workers, because once you see the numbers, you'll realize this isn't just about hurt feelings. It's about tens of thousands of dollars being extracted from your bank account and transferred into corporate profits. True, according to research from the Society for Human Resource Management, employees at companies with family culture messaging work an average of 6.2 additional hours per week compared to companies with more transactional workplace cultures. 6.2 hours per week. That's over 320 hours per year. That's 8 full work weeks of free labor you're donating because you feel like you owe it to your work family. Now, if you're making $60,000 per year, your hourly rate is roughly $29. Those 320 extra hours are worth about $9,280. In additional compensation, you're not receiving. That's $9,280 every single year that you're essentially gifting to your employer because they made you feel like part of the family. But it gets worse. Those same studies show that employees in family culture environments are 40% less likely to negotiate salary increases, 35% less likely to leave for better opportunities, and 60% more likely to accept additional responsibilities without additional compensation. Think about what this means over the course of a career. Let's say you stay at a family culture company for 10 years. You're working 320 extra hours per year unpaid, which is $92,800 in free labor at that $60,000 salary level. You're probably underpaid by about 15% compared to market rate because you didn't negotiate aggressively, which at that salary is $9,000 per year or $90,000 over 10 years. You've sacrificed nearly $200,000 over a decade because someone convinced you that asking for fair compensation would be betraying the family. Meanwhile, the executives who push that family culture, they're not taking pay cuts when times are tough. They're not sacrificing their bonuses because the family is struggling. They're extracting maximum value from the emotional labor they've convinced you to provide for free. Now let's talk about the psychology of why this works, because understanding the mechanism is the first step to protecting yourself from it. Humans are deeply wired for tribal belonging. For most of human history, being excluded from your group meant death. Your brain treats social rejection as a genuine threat to your survival. Companies that use family language are hacking this evolutionary wiring. When your boss says, "We're a family," your brain doesn't hear, "We have a transactional employment relationship with professional boundaries." Your brain hears, "You belong to this tribe," and your survival depends on maintaining that belonging. This triggers what psychologists call identity fusion, where the boundary between your individual identity and the group identity starts to blur. You stop thinking, "What's best for me?" and start thinking, "What's best for us?" Which sounds beautiful and collaborative until you realize that us means the company's profit margins, not your financial security. Here's where the manipulation gets really sophisticated. Family culture companies create what's called a culture of sacrifice, where demonstrating your commitment through personal sacrifice becomes a signal of your value to the group. The person who stays latest becomes the most dedicated family member. The person who skips their kid's soccer game for a work emergency becomes the most reliable family member. This creates a competitive dynamic where people start sacrificing more and more to prove their belonging, and the company doesn't even have to ask for these sacrifices explicitly. The culture does the asking for them. I've seen people cancel weddings, skip funerals, work through illnesses, and destroy personal relationships because they felt like letting down their work family would be a moral failure. And the entire time, the company is calculating whether these people's productive value exceeds their compensation cost. There's also something called reciprocity obligation that kicks in. Your boss remembers your birthday, asks about your dog, and sends a card when your grandmother dies. These are small gestures that cost the company almost nothing, but they create a feeling of debt in your mind. You feel like you owe something back. So when they need you to work late, or cover for someone, or take on extra projects, you feel obligated to say yes because they've been so good to you. The $15 birthday card creates hundreds or thousands of dollars in unpaid labor because you feel guilty saying no. But here's what's really messed up about the whole system. The people most vulnerable to this manipulation are often the best employees. The ones who genuinely care about doing good work. The ones who build real relationships with their coworkers. The ones who take pride in being reliable and helpful. These people aren't stupid or weak. They're operating on a normal human understanding of reciprocity and loyalty. The problem is they're playing by family rules while the company is playing by business rules, and business rules always win that game. Let me give you a specific example that illustrates exactly how one-sided this family relationship actually is. I know someone who worked at a startup that was heavy on the family culture messaging. They had family dinners every Friday. The CEO knew everyone's personal situations. People genuinely cared about each other. This person worked 60 to 70-hour weeks for 3 years, often weekends, building a critical system for the company. They were paid $75,000 per year when market rate for their skills was closer to $110,000. But they didn't push for more money because the family culture made them feel like asking for fair compensation would be greedy or disloyal. Then their father got diagnosed with cancer across the country, and they needed to work remotely for 3 months to help care for him. The company said no. Remote work wasn't part of our culture and wouldn't be fair to everyone else. When they pushed back, citing the years of sacrifice and the family culture, they were told, "We need to do what's best for the business." They resigned. The company replaced them within 2 weeks and never spoke to them again. That's not a family. That's a business that used family language to extract cheap labor until the employee needed actual family-like support in return. Now let's talk about the specific phrases and behaviors that should set off alarm bells in your head, because "we're a family" isn't the only way this manipulation manifests. Anytime you hear these phrases, you're being primed to sacrifice your interests for company profit. We all need to pitch in right now. Translation: we need you to work extra hours without extra pay. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Translation: your personal time isn't important compared to company needs. You're the only one I can count on. Translation: I'm leveraging your desire to be valued to manipulate you into doing more work. We're all in this together. Translation: executives are making millions while we need you to skip your vacation. This is temporary, just until we get through this rough patch. Translation: this will become permanent, and there will always be another rough patch. These phrases are designed to bypass your rational self-interest and appeal directly to your emotions. They make you feel special, needed, and valued, while simultaneously extracting resources from you. And here's the really insidious part. The people saying these things often believe them. Your manager probably does think of you as family. They probably do feel bad about asking you to sacrifice. But feeling bad doesn't change the underlying economic reality. When the company makes cuts, that manager who felt so bad will approve your layoff because it's their job to prioritize business needs over personal relationships. Let's contrast this with what a healthy workplace relationship actually looks like. Because I don't want you to think I'm arguing for cold, impersonal work environments. You can have warm, respectful, even friendly relationships with your coworkers and bosses without the toxic family dynamic. A healthy workplace is honest about what it is. It's a professional relationship based on mutual benefit. You provide valuable work, they provide fair compensation and good working conditions. You can enjoy each other's company, support each other professionally, and even develop genuine friendships. But everyone understands that this is ultimately a business arrangement. In a healthy workplace, when they need extra work from you, they pay you for it. When they want you to take on more responsibility, they promote you and increase your compensation. When you set boundaries about your personal time, they respect those boundaries because they understand you're a whole person with a life outside of work. Most importantly, in a healthy workplace, you don't feel guilty for advocating for yourself. You don't feel like you're betraying anyone by negotiating for better pay or considering other opportunities. You don't lie awake at night feeling bad about using your vacation days. Here's a simple test to determine whether your workplace is actually a healthy environment or whether family is being used to exploit you. Ask yourself this: if I needed to take 3 months off for a serious personal situation, would the company support me? Not with words and sympathy, but with actual structural support like holding my job, maintaining my benefits, and welcoming me back? If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, then you're not in a family. You're in a business that uses family language to make you work harder for less money. Another test. If you left tomorrow for a 20% raise at another company, would your boss be happy for you, or would they make you feel guilty about abandoning the family? Real family celebrates when you get better opportunities. Businesses masquerading as families punish you for acting in your own interest. Now let's talk about the long-term career damage that family culture companies inflict on employees, because this goes way beyond just working extra hours. When you're deeply embedded in a family culture workplace, you stop developing the skills and mindset needed to advance your career. You stop networking outside your company because that feels like cheating on your family. You stop keeping your resume updated because that feels like planning to leave. You stop researching market rates for your skills because that feels like you're planning to ask for more money, which feels greedy when the family is struggling. Meanwhile, people at companies with healthier boundaries are doing all of these things. They're building external networks, they're aware of their market value, they're strategically managing their careers. 5 years later, they've advanced faster and earned more because they weren't hampered by emotional manipulation disguised as culture. I've seen people spend 10, 15, even 20 years at family culture companies, being told they're valued and appreciated, only to discover during a layoff that they're dramatically underpaid compared to market rate. Their skills have become company-specific because they never had the mental space to think about their broader career. Their network is entirely internal because they put all their emotional energy into the work family. When they hit the job market, they struggle. And the company that positioned itself as family? They move on immediately. No job search support, no extensive severance, no ongoing relationships. Just a 2-week notice period and a "we wish you well." That's what family culture really costs. Not just money in the moment, but entire career trajectories bent toward serving corporate interests instead of building personal wealth and professional growth. Here's what makes me angriest about this whole dynamic. The executives who push family culture the hardest are the ones who benefit most from it and sacrifice least for it. They're not taking pay cuts when they ask employees to work unpaid overtime. They're not skipping their bonuses when they ask employees to postpone raises for the good of the family. They're paying themselves millions while convincing everyone else that asking for fair compensation is selfish and unfamily-like. The CEO who talks about family values during company meetings is the same person who approved a compensation structure that pays them 300 times what the average employee makes. That's not a family. That's feudalism with better marketing. Let me share some specific data about what happens during layoffs at family culture companies, because this is where the facade completely crumbles. According to research from MIT Sloan School of Management, companies with strong family culture messaging lay off employees at the same rate as other companies during downturns, but those employees report significantly higher levels of emotional trauma and betrayal. Why? Because they actually believed the family message. They sacrificed their time, their personal relationships, their financial interests because they thought the company would protect them in return. When they got laid off via email or in a 5-minute meeting with an HR representative, the cognitive dissonance was devastating. And here's the really sick part. Many of these employees blame themselves. They feel like they failed the family. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't sacrifice enough. They weren't valuable enough. They internalized the failure instead of recognizing they were manipulated by people who never intended to honor the family commitment. I've talked to people years after being laid off from family culture companies who still feel guilty, like they let people down. Meanwhile, the company filled their position within weeks and never thought about them again. So how do you protect yourself if you're currently working in a family culture environment? Because I'm not naive enough to think you can just quit tomorrow and find something better. You need practical strategies to maintain boundaries while navigating this dynamic. First, recognize what's happening. Stop thinking of work as family and start thinking of it as a professional relationship with friendly elements. This mental reframing is crucial because it allows you to set boundaries without feeling guilty. When your boss says, "We're all family here," you can mentally translate that to, "We're colleagues working together professionally." When they say, "I need you to pitch in," you can translate that to, "I'm asking you to work additional hours," which lets you respond with, "What additional compensation are you offering for that additional work?" Second, document everything. Family operates on trust and unspoken agreements. Businesses operate on documentation and formal agreements. Keep records of your extra hours, your additional responsibilities, your achievements. When it's time to negotiate, you'll have concrete evidence of your value instead of just warm feelings and vague promises. Third, maintain external relationships and keep your skills current. Set aside time every week for networking outside your company, learning new skills, and staying aware of market rates for your position. This isn't disloyal. This is basic career management that every professional should do. Fourth, practice saying no without guilt. Start small. "I can't work this Saturday. I have family commitments." Notice I said family, not work family. Real family. The people who can't fire you. When they push back with family culture language, hold firm. "I appreciate that we have a great culture here, but I need to maintain boundaries for my personal well-being." If they make you feel guilty for having boundaries, that's evidence you're being manipulated, not evidence that you're a bad family member. Fifth, negotiate aggressively. Family culture companies rely on employees not negotiating because it feels greedy or disloyal. Break that pattern. Research market rates, document your value, and ask for what you're worth. If they push back with, "We can't afford it," or "That's not how we do things here," you can respond with, "I understand, but this is what I need to continue in this role." Many times, they'll find the money because losing you would cost more than paying you fairly. If they don't, you've learned something valuable about how much the family culture is worth to them. Here's something that might surprise you. The best way to get fair treatment from a family culture company is to be willing to leave. The moment you have an external offer, suddenly the company discovers budget for raises, promotions become available, and your value to the family increases dramatically. This is because the family language only works on people who believe it. The moment you demonstrate you're making decisions based on business logic rather than emotional manipulation, the power dynamic shifts. They can't guilt you into staying if you're not susceptible to guilt. I know someone who worked at a family culture startup for 5 years. They were consistently told there was no budget for raises, everyone needed to sacrifice, they were all building something together. They got an external offer for 40% more money and gave notice. Suddenly, the company had budget for a 30% raise and a promotion. Where was that money the previous 5 years? It existed, but the family culture had convinced this person they didn't deserve it. The moment they stopped playing by family rules, the business relationship became honest. Let me address something that some of you are probably thinking. But John, I genuinely like the people I work with. We do support each other. It's not all manipulation. And I believe you, workplace friendships are real. Support among colleagues is real. The problem isn't that people care about each other. The problem is when that care is leveraged to extract economic value. You can have all the positive aspects of workplace relationships without the exploitative family framing. You can support your colleagues, enjoy their company, celebrate successes together, and help each other through challenges. But you can do all of that while maintaining clear boundaries about your time, your compensation, and your career priorities. The difference is in the framing. Where colleagues who work well together and care about each other is honest and healthy. Where a family is manipulation that sets up unfair expectations and one-sided sacrifice. Here's the ultimate test of whether your workplace is actually supportive or just using family language to exploit you. What happens when someone leaves for a better opportunity? Do people celebrate their success and stay in touch? Or do they talk about how that person abandoned the family and isn't welcome anymore? Real families celebrate when members succeed, even if that success takes them away from the family unit. Your parents are happy when you move out and start your own life. Your siblings are excited when you get a great job in another city. That's how family works. If your work family turns on people who leave for better opportunities, they were never actually family. They were a cult using family language to enforce conformity and punish dissent. So there you have it. Where a family isn't a culture, it's a control mechanism. It's a way to make you feel guilty for advocating for yourself, asking for fair compensation, setting boundaries, or pursuing better opportunities. And the people using this language might genuinely believe they're creating something positive. But the economic reality is exploitation dressed up in emotional manipulation. You don't owe your employer the same loyalty you owe your actual family. You don't need to sacrifice your financial security, your personal time, or your mental health for people who would replace you within days if it served their interests. You can be professional, do good work, and even enjoy your coworkers without falling for the family trap. Next time your boss talks about how you're all family, remember this. Families don't lay people off when quarterly numbers are bad. Families don't calculate whether you're worth keeping based on your productive value. Families don't fire you for being sick or needing time off to care for a loved one. You know what does all those things? A business, and you're working for a business, not a family. Start treating it like one. Set boundaries. Negotiate aggressively. Keep your options open. And stop feeling guilty for acting in your own interest, because the company sure as hell isn't feeling guilty about acting in theirs.